Welcome back to Beyond Words, where every act of kindness has the power to change lives, including our own. Where are you watching from today? Let us know in the comments below. We'd love to hear your stories too. A doctor stands alone in a dimly lit hospital corridor, her scrubs stained with sweat and blood, her face etched with exhaustion. The clock strikes midnight, but she doesn't leave. Instead, she kneels beside a dying patient's bed, clasping their hand and whispering prayers under her breath. Science has done all it can. Now she turns to faith. What happens when one of those patients survives against all odds? What happens when that survival isn't just a miracle? It's the beginning of something extraordinary. Today's story will take you into the life of a doctor who gave everything she had. Not just her medical expertise, but her heart and soul to save her patients. And how one man, brought back from the brink of death, decided to honor her sacrifices in a way no one saw coming. This is a journey you won't forget. Dr. Anjali Kapoor had always believed in miracles, but not the kind that came without effort. To her, miracles were born from relentless determination, unwavering faith, and a refusal to surrender, even when the odds seemed insurmountable. At 39, she was already a veteran of the medical field, having spent nearly 2 decades at St. Mary's Hospital, an underfunded facility in the heart of a bustling city. It wasn't glamorous work. The equipment was outdated, the staff stretched thin, and the patients often arrived too late for conventional medicine to make much difference. Yet Anjali stayed, not because she didn't have better options, but because she couldn't bear to leave. Every night unfolded like a battlefield. The ER overflowed with cases ranging from gunshot wounds to car accidents to terminal illnesses. Anjali moved between beds with precision, her hands steady despite the chaos around her. But beneath her calm exterior lay a storm of emotions: exhaustion, frustration, and an unrelenting sense of responsibility for every life entrusted to her care. It wasn't just the physical toll that wore her down, it was the emotional weight. She carried the stories of her patients long after they left her care, whether alive or gone. Some nights, when the hospital fell silent except for the rhythmic beeping of monitors, Anjali would sit alone in the chapel tucked away on the ground floor. There, surrounded by flickering candles and faint echoes of whispered prayers, she'd beg for strength, for herself and for her patients. "Please," she murmured one particularly grueling night, her head bowed over clasped hands. "If there's any way to save them, show me. Help me." Her colleagues admired her dedication but worried about the cost it exacted. "You're going to burn out if you keep this up," Dr. Mehta, a senior physician, warned her during a rare quiet moment in the break room. "I'm already burned out," Anjali replied honestly, rubbing her temples. "But what choice do I have? If I stop fighting for them, who will?" That same night, fate tested her resolve once again. A young man was rushed into the ER, his body mangled beyond recognition after a devastating car crash. Paramedics worked frantically to stabilize him as Anjali took charge, barking orders and moving with practiced efficiency. By the time they transferred him to ICU, his chances of survival were slim at best. Yet something about him stirred something deep within Anjali. Perhaps it was the faint pulse that refused to fade, or maybe it was the photo clutched in his hand, a smiling woman holding a toddler. Whatever it was, she felt compelled to fight harder than ever before. For 3 days and nights, Anjali barely left his side. When treatments failed, she prayed. When hope wavered, she doubled down. And somewhere between science and faith, a spark of life began to flicker. Little did she know, this patient would change everything. The young man lying unconscious in ICU bed 12 was named Rohan Mehta, a name Anjali learned only after piecing together fragments of information from his belongings and emergency contacts. He was 28 years old, a successful entrepreneur with a thriving tech startup, and the sole provider for his wife and toddler son. That photo clutched tightly in his hand became a symbol of everything he stood to lose, and everything Anjali fought so desperately to save. Rohan's condition was dire: multiple fractures, internal bleeding, and severe trauma to his brain left little room for optimism. Specialists consulted by Anjali shook their heads gravely, suggesting palliative care as the most humane option. But Anjali couldn't bring herself to give up. Not yet. He's still breathing, she insisted during a tense meeting with the medical team. As long as there's breath, there's hope. Her colleagues respected her tenacity but privately doubted her chances. They'd seen cases like this before, patients clinging to life by threads too fragile to hold. Yet, Anjali refused to let Rohan slip away without a fight. Over the next 72 hours, she orchestrated every possible intervention. Experimental drugs, round-the-clock monitoring, and delicate surgeries pushed the limits of what St. Mary's underfunded resources could offer. Exhausted nurses whispered among themselves about her unwavering dedication, wondering how one person could endure such relentless pressure. But it wasn't just her actions that set her apart. It was her presence. During rare moments when the hospital grew quiet, Anjali would sit beside Rohan's bed, holding his hand and speaking softly. "You have people waiting for you," she murmured one night, staring at the photo taped to the wall above his bed. "Your wife, your little boy. You can't leave them now. Fight, Rohan. Please fight." She didn't know if he could hear her, or if anyone ever did, but she prayed he could feel the weight of her words. Faith had always been her anchor in moments like these, a reminder that some battles required more than medicine to win. On the third night, something extraordinary happened. As Anjali knelt beside Rohan's bed, whispering another desperate prayer, the monitors tracking his vitals suddenly beeped louder. His heart rate stabilized slightly, and his oxygen levels began inching upward. Nurses rushed in, startled by the unexpected improvement. "Is this real?" one asked, glancing nervously at Anjali. "It has to be," Anjali replied, though her voice trembled with disbelief. She reached out to touch Rohan's forehead, her fingers brushing against cool skin. For the first time in days, she allowed herself a flicker of hope. Still, recovery wasn't guaranteed. Over the following weeks, Rohan remained in critical condition, teetering between life and death. Each setback tested Anjali's resolve, but each small victory reignited her determination. She spent countless nights researching obscure treatments, consulting specialists across the globe, and praying harder than ever before. And then, one morning, Rohan opened his eyes. It wasn't dramatic or cinematic. He blinked slowly, confusion clouding his gaze as he tried to make sense of the sterile white ceiling above him. But to Anjali, standing at the foot of his bed, it felt like witnessing a miracle. "Welcome back," she said softly, tears streaming down her face. "You've got a lot of people waiting for you." Rohan didn't respond immediately. His body was too weak, his mind too foggy. But deep within the recesses of his consciousness, he remembered something. A voice, soft and steady, urging him to fight. A voice that sounded like hope itself. Rohan's awakening marked the beginning of a long and grueling recovery process. His body, battered and broken, required months of intensive rehabilitation. Simple tasks like sitting up or swallowing water felt insurmountable at first, but Rohan refused to give up. He clung to fragments of memories, flashes of warmth, whispers of encouragement, that guided him through the darkness. One memory stood out vividly. A voice, soft yet unwavering, speaking words he couldn't quite recall but somehow understood. It was a lifeline during his coma, a presence that made him feel less alone in the void. Now, as he regained consciousness, he became obsessed with identifying its source. "Who was with me?" Rohan asked one day, his voice hoarse from disuse. "When I was out." The nurse attending him hesitated before answering. "Dr. Kapoor. She stayed with you almost every night." Anjali had become somewhat of a legend among the hospital staff, not just for her medical expertise, but for her compassion. Stories circulated about how she prayed over dying patients, held their hands when families abandoned them, and worked tirelessly to ensure no life slipped away unnoticed. To Rohan, hearing these accounts ignited a spark of gratitude and curiosity. He finally met her face-to-face during one of her rounds. By then, he'd pieced together enough information to recognize her immediately. Standing beside his bed, clipboard in hand, Anjali looked both familiar and foreign. Her eyes were kind but shadowed by exhaustion. Her smile warm despite the weariness etched into her features. "You're awake," she said simply, though her tone carried layers of relief and joy. I am, Rohan replied, his voice barely above a whisper. Because of you. Anjali shook her head modestly. I just did my job. No, Rohan insisted, his gaze locking onto hers. You did more than that. I remember your voice. You told me to fight. For a moment, neither spoke. The weight of his words hung heavy between them, bridging the gap between patient and healer. Anjali lowered her eyes, unsure how to respond. She hadn't expected recognition or gratitude from someone whose survival had seemed so improbable. I'm glad you listened, she said finally, offering a small smile. As weeks turned into months, Rohan grew stronger, both physically and emotionally. Physical therapy sessions pushed him to his limits, but he persevered, driven by thoughts of returning to his family. Meanwhile, his conversations with Anjali deepened. During quiet moments, they talked about everything. Their fears, their dreams, the fragility of life itself. Through these exchanges, Rohan began to understand the depth of Anjali's sacrifices. She wasn't just a doctor. She was a guardian angel for countless patients who had nowhere else to turn. Her tireless dedication stemmed not from obligation, but from an unshakable belief in the value of every human life. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting golden light across Rohan's room, he posed a question that caught Anjali off guard. What keeps you going? He asked. After everything you've seen, everything you've lost, why do you keep fighting? Anjali paused, considering her answer carefully. Because sometimes, she began slowly, the hardest battles are worth fighting. Not because we win every time, but because giving up means losing something far greater than ourselves. Hope, faith, humanity. Her response lingered in Rohan's mind long after their conversation ended. For the first time in his life, he saw medicine not as a profession, but as a calling, a sacred duty to preserve life and restore hope. And then came the revelation that would change everything. During a routine checkup, Rohan learned about the state of St. Mary's Hospital, the crumbling infrastructure, the outdated equipment, the endless struggle to provide quality care on a shoestring budget. What shocked him most was discovering that Anjali often dipped into her own savings to cover costs when funding fell short. That's insane, Rohan muttered under his breath, shaking his head in disbelief. It's not ideal, Anjali admitted, shrugging as if it were no big deal. But it's what we have to work with. To Rohan, this level of selflessness bordered on incomprehensible. Growing up in privilege, he'd never encountered such profound generosity or sacrifice. As he lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling, a plan began to form in his mind. Rohan's recovery was nothing short of miraculous, though it came with its share of challenges. Physical therapy sessions left him drenched in sweat, his muscles screaming in protest as he relearned basic movements. Emotional scars ran even deeper. Memories of the accident haunted him, and moments of doubt threatened to derail his progress. But through it all, one constant remained: Anjali's unwavering support. She visited him regularly, not just as his doctor but as a friend who genuinely cared about his journey. Their conversations grew more personal over time, revealing layers of vulnerability neither had expected to share. Rohan spoke candidly about his fears, of never fully recovering, of failing his family, of being forever defined by tragedy. Anjali listened intently, offering wisdom born from years of witnessing humanity at its most fragile. You're stronger than you think, she told him one afternoon, her voice firm yet gentle. Strength isn't about avoiding pain. It's about facing it head-on and refusing to let it break you. Her words resonated deeply, fueling Rohan's determination to reclaim his life. Slowly but surely, he began regaining independence. He walked without assistance for the first time, held his wife's hand during a tearful reunion, and hugged his toddler son, a moment that nearly overwhelmed him with emotion. Each milestone felt like a victory not just for him, but for everyone who had believed in his survival. Yet, amidst the joy of recovery, Rohan couldn't shake the image of Anjali working tirelessly in an underfunded hospital, sacrificing pieces of herself to save others. It gnawed at him, not out of guilt, but out of admiration. He realized that while he owed her his life, she deserved far more than gratitude. She deserved recognition and action. One evening, as Rohan prepared to be discharged, he summoned the courage to ask Anjali a question that had been weighing heavily on his mind. Dr. Kapoor, he began hesitantly, what would you say if someone wanted to repay you for everything you've done? Anjali raised an eyebrow, surprised by the question. Repay me, she repeated, chuckling softly. Rohan, your recovery is repayment enough. Seeing you walk out of here, to your family, is all I ever wanted. But what about the hospital? Rohan pressed, his tone earnest. What if someone could help fix the broken equipment, upgrade the facilities, make sure no patient ever has to suffer because of limited resources? Anjali's expression softened, touched by his concern. That's a noble thought, she admitted. But hospitals like St. Mary's operate on shoestring budgets. Dreams like that take more than good intentions, they take miracles. Rohan smiled faintly, a spark of resolve lighting up his eyes. Maybe miracles aren't as rare as we think. He didn't elaborate further, leaving Anjali intrigued but unsure of what he meant. Still, the seed had been planted. Over the next few weeks, Rohan threw himself into planning something extraordinary. A gesture so profound it would leave an indelible mark on the woman who had saved him. Meanwhile, Anjali returned to her routine, unaware of the storm brewing behind the scenes. Life at St. Mary's continued as usual. Overcrowded wards, sleepless nights, and endless prayers whispered into the void. Yet, beneath the chaos, a sense of anticipation lingered, as though fate itself was preparing to reward her sacrifices in ways she couldn't yet imagine. Little did she know, Rohan was about to turn her world upside down. Months after Rohan's discharge, Anjali received an invitation to a private event hosted by a local philanthropic organization. Curious but skeptical, she attended reluctantly, assuming it was another fundraiser for medical supplies, a cause she supported but rarely celebrated publicly. What awaited her, however, was unlike anything she could have imagined. As she stepped into the grand hall, her eyes widened in disbelief. Posters adorned the walls, each featuring photos of St. Mary's Hospital alongside captions like, "A Beacon of Hope," and "Dedicated to Dr. Anjali Kapoor." Nurses, patients, and colleagues cheered as she entered, their faces glowing with pride and excitement. And then Rohan appeared, standing at the center of the room with a microphone in hand. Dressed impeccably, he looked healthier and more confident than ever before, but his expression radiated pure gratitude. Dr. Kapoor, he began, his voice steady yet filled with emotion. When I woke up in that hospital bed, I didn't just see a doctor. I saw a hero, someone who gave everything she had to save not just me, but countless others. Today, I want to honor your sacrifices in the best way I know how. With a dramatic flourish, he gestured toward a large screen behind him. A video played, showcasing architectural renderings of a state-of-the-art hospital, complete with cutting-edge equipment, spacious wards, and advanced research facilities. At the bottom of every image was a dedication. In honor of Dr. Anjali Kapoor, this is my gift to you, and to everyone whose lives you've touched. Rohan continued, turning back to face her. St. Mary's will rise again, bigger and better than ever, thanks to your inspiration. And this time, no patient will ever lack access to the care they deserve. Anjali stood frozen, tears streaming down her face as the weight of his gesture sank in. For years, she'd poured her heart into saving lives without expecting recognition or reward. But now, here was proof that kindness truly did inspire kindness, and that miracles weren't reserved solely for medicine. I don't know what to say, she stammered finally, her voice trembling. You don't have to say anything, Rohan replied warmly. Just keep doing what you've always done. Changing lives. The room erupted into applause, but Anjali barely noticed. All she could think about was the ripple effect of her actions, and how one act of compassion had sparked something extraordinary. The new hospital, named Kapoor Memorial Healthcare Center, became a beacon of hope for the community within 2 years of its opening. Equipped with state-of-the-art technology and staffed by compassionate professionals inspired by Anjali's example, it transformed countless lives, including those who had once been turned away from overcrowded facilities. Anjali continued to lead with humility, mentoring young doctors and advocating for underserved patients. She often walked through the halls of the gleaming building, marveling at how far they'd come. The chapel where she used to pray in solitude was now a serene meditation room open to everyone, a reminder that faith and science could coexist harmoniously. Rohan remained closely involved, funding scholarships for aspiring medical students and spearheading initiatives to expand healthcare access globally. Together, he and Anjali proved that gratitude wasn't just an emotion, it was a catalyst for change. One evening, as Anjali stood outside the hospital watching families leave with smiles of relief, Rohan joined her. "You did this," she said softly, gesturing toward the bustling entrance. "No," Rohan replied, shaking his head. "We did this together, and so, beyond words reminds us, every act of kindness plants a seed. When nurtured with love and faith, those seeds grow into something extraordinary, changing not just individual lives, but entire communities." Thank you for watching. If this story inspired you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Beyond Words for more tales that celebrate the beauty of humanity. Until next time, remember, doing good always comes back around.